The morning sun had just begun to cast its warm, golden glow over the rolling hills, painting the sky in shades of soft amber and pale pink. Inside the cozy wooden structure, the gentle hum of early morning life was just starting to stir. Jed stepped into the main room, his boots tapping softly against the worn wooden floorboards. He stretched his arms wide, breathing in the crisp, clean air of the dawn, and looked toward the kitchen area where Jethro was already hovering. "Good morning, Jeb," Jethro said, his voice bright with the optimism of a brand new day, though his stomach gave a loud, timely rumble to emphasize his true priority. "Is breakfast ready yet?" Jed smiled gently, shaking his head at the young man's boundless appetite. "Ready not, boy," Jed replied, his tone calm and unhurried. "Granny ain't up yet." Before Jethro could complain about the delay, the heavy wooden door burst open, and Ellie Mae rushed into the room. Her face was pale, and her breathing was shallow as she gripped the doorframe, her eyes wide with sudden panic. "Pa." "Jethro, Granny's gone," Ellie Mae cried out, her voice trembling with genuine distress. "Her bed ain't been slept in." "What?" Jed asked, his eyebrows knitting together in immediate concern as he took a step forward. "She's plumb disappeared," Ellie Mae insisted, waving her hands toward the empty back room. "Ain't no sign of her anywhere." Jethro rubbed his chin thoughtfully, trying to piece together the mystery with his own unique brand of logic. "You reckon she went back to the hills with Alberta Bradshaw?" he asked, looking between his father and his cousin. "No, sir," Ellie Mae said, shaking her head quickly. "I seen her after Miss Bradshaw left. She was still right here around the place." Jethro's eyes widened as a much more dramatic theory popped into his head. "I'll bet she's been kidnapped," he declared, nodding solemnly as if he had just solved a major criminal case. "Oh, Pa," Ellie Mae wailed, clapping her hands together in anxiety. "Oh, please don't let no harm come to my darling little Granny." Jethro looked at her, his expression softening slightly, but quickly shifting back to his practical concerns. "That's real touchin', boy," Jethro said, though he turned his gaze back to the empty kitchen. "Well, I sure don't want to have to eat Ellie's cookin'." Jed remained still for a moment, stroking his chin as he looked out the front window toward the vast backyard. A slow, knowing smile began to develop on his weathered face. "I think I know where she might be," Jed said quietly. "Where, Pa?" Ellie Mae asked, rushing to his side and looking up at him with hopeful eyes. "Well, ever since we put up the old cabin out back, Granny has had a certain look in her eyes," Jed explained, turning toward the door. "I'll bet you that's where we find her." "Come on." The small group stepped out into the fresh morning air, walking down the beaten path that led past the animal pens. Ellie Mae, despite her worry, could not help but greet her beloved animal friends as they walked by. "Morning, Mrs. Hogg," Ellie Mae said with a bright smile, waving at the large, content animal resting in the mud. She turned her head slightly to the side as they passed the next enclosure. "Mrs. Cow, good morning, chickens." Just as Jed had suspected, the small, rustic cabin at the edge of the property was smoking gently from its stone chimney. They approached the squeaking wooden door and pushed it open to find Granny standing happily by a roaring fireplace, looking more energetic than she had in weeks. "Well, we kind of figured we'd find you out here," Jed said, stepping inside the small room. "Granny, did you spend the night in that little old cabin?" Granny turned around, a look of absolute triumph and peace on her face. "I did, and it was pure heaven," she declared, holding her wooden spoon like a scepter. Jethro looked around the cramped, simple room, scratching his head in complete bewilderment. "Heaven? This little shack?" he asked, unable to comprehend why anyone would leave their luxurious surroundings for this. Granny ignored his skepticism and looked at Jed with burning enthusiasm. "Jeth, let's all move back in here where we belong and live the good life," she urged, gesturing to the small space. "Granny, we ain't movin' out of no 32-room mansion into this dump," Jethro protested immediately, his mind flashing back to the soft beds and vast hallways of their other home. Suddenly, a rich, savory aroma began to drift from the iron skillet resting over the fire, filling the cabin with a scent so delicious it made everyone stop in their tracks. Jethro's stomach let out another massive rumble. Something sure smells good, he admitted, his resistance melting away instantly. I'm fixin' fried ham, whole cakes and gravy, Granny said with a knowing smirk, watching the young man's eyes lock onto the food. Without a single moment of hesitation, Jethro turned to Jed, his entire stance completely changed. Uncle Jed, let's move in here and live the good life, the young man pleaded, his eyes wide with hunger. Jed chuckled, placing a steady hand on the boy's shoulder to hold him back. Wait, super stomach, Jed joked. Let me set the table first. Ellie Mae looked around the tiny room, trying to imagine how they would all manage. Pa, is we really gonna move into this little cabin, all four of us? She asked quietly. Well, if we don't, Granny ain't gonna give us no peace and no biddles, Jed reasoned, knowing exactly how stubborn Granny could be when she made up her mind about the old ways. Granny sniffed, turning her back to them to check on the sizzling ham. Well, if you want to stay in the mansion, I'll cook for you, she offered over her shoulder, though her tone suggested they would be missing out on the best meals of their lives. Well, that's surpassing kind of you, Ellie, Jed said, trying to be polite while weighing their options. Well, I need to practice, Ellie Mae added cheerfully, always eager to help around the house. True, Jed agreed, nodding slowly. But if we don't do like Granny wants, we ain't never gonna hear the last of it. Jethro, still looking at the small corners of the cabin, realized a logistical problem. Well, where'll we sleep? He asked. Well, you women folks can take the bedroom, Jed decided, gesturing toward the back section of the cabin. Yes, there are meal spreader blankets in front of the fireplace for the rest of us. Jethro looked down at the solid wooden floorboards with a frown. That floor's awful hard, he muttered. Well, it'll only be till Granny gets this notion out of her craw, Jed reassured him in a low whisper, hoping this nostalgia trip would run its course quickly. Suddenly, a shadow fell over the doorway, and a small, familiar figure stepped into the cabin, looking around with a curious expression. Oh, here you are, the man said. Morning, Shorty, Jed greeted him warmly. Morning, Miss Kelly, Shorty replied, tipping his hat politely to Ellie Mae. What you doin' down here? We's fixin' to move into this little old cabin, Jed explained, gesturing to the cozy surrounding walls. Shorty looked surprised, his eyes darting around the small room. Everybody? He asked. You're welcome to join us, Shorty, Ellie Mae said with a bright, welcoming smile. You can bed down on the floor with Jethro and me. Shorty looked at the hard floor, then thought of the massive, empty building up the hill. If it's all the same to you, I'd like to stay in the mansion, he said quickly. Well, you'll be all alone, Jed pointed out, wondering if the man would truly enjoy the vast emptiness. I'll rough it, Shorty insisted with a small grin, already imagining the freedom of having the entire place to himself. Can you manage that big old place all by yourself? Ellie Mae asked, a hint of worry in her voice. Jerry used to run a hotel by himself, Shorty reasoned, waving off her concern with a confident gesture. Elvin and Bradshaw ain't here to cook for you no more, Jed reminded him, knowing that a large house required a lot of maintenance and food preparation. I'll make out, Shorty said smoothly. Jed shook his head, looking up toward the large structure on the hill. That big old mansion is likely to be kind of cold and lonely without a woman's touch, he observed. Yeah, that's true, Shorty admitted, pausing for a brief second to reflect on the thought. But I'll get along. Okay, Shorty, Jed said, raising his hand in a gesture of agreement. Place is yours. It's a deal, Shorty said, his face lighting up with excitement as he turned to head back up to his newly acquired domain, leaving the family to their rustic breakfast.